Welcome to the Gay Therapy LA podcast, the show that empowers gay men to live their fullest, healthiest lives. Whether you're navigating relationships, mental health, intimacy, finances, career, or personal growth, Ken Howard, a licensed clinical social worker in California, certified psychiatric social worker, and ASEC certified sex therapist, is here to guide you with over 30 years of experience, specializing in gay male individuals, couples, and polycules. As the founder of GayTherapyLA.com and GayCoachingLA.com. And now, today's episode.
Hi, I'm Ken Howard, and welcome to the Gay Therapy LA podcast. Today, I'd like to talk about gay men and overcoming our unconscious barriers to success. So, I've been a gay men specialist, psychotherapist, and coach for over 33 years now. And lately, I've been using the joke, the older I get, the stronger my opinions get. Because I see the same things that gay men do to mess up their lives over and over and over again, certain behavioral patterns that emerge after, observational experience of thousands of gay male clients. And I also see the things, fortunately, that tend to work to solve problems over and over and over again, very reliably. It's a little bit like a medicine that's been determined through research to cure or treat a disease. It's a little bit like in physics, for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. Or the idea for every poison, there is an antidote. Or for every curse, there is something that breaks the curse. It can be very binary. And, okay, our lives are a little more complicated than that. They have nuances. But I do notice certain patterns. So in much of my work with my clients, either my therapy clients or my coaching clients, we are battling a whole list of what I call the unconscious barriers to our own progress, our own success in life, in the many ways that we might define that. We have inner conflicts that make us take 2 steps forward and then 1 step back, even without hitting snags that are outside of us, outside of our control, even though these can be there. But I've also found and observed for myself and with my clients that it's often not the outside barriers, the ultimate obstruction to getting what we want. It's inside us by a big margin, by far. So just let's look at this list of unconscious barriers I've been able to glean over 30 years of practice. But let's also look at what I call, and social workers often call, an adaptive coping strategy to overcome each one of them. So they're in no particular order, but if you know my content, you know that I like lists. I'm very kind of organized that way. So we'll look at the list. So these are in no particular order. I'll just read them to you, of the unconscious barriers. Number 1, self-doubt. Number 2, feeling like we are not deserving. Number 3, a fear of betraying our parents with our own success. Number 4 is a fear of being seen or exposed, kind of being an introvert. Number 5 is the fear of being perceived as some kind of rich, musclehead, greedy, cocky douche, afraid of a public perception of a persona that we don't like in our value system. Number 6 is a fear of not having something left to dream for afterward. If we fulfill our bucket list, do we then just kick the bucket, or do we add to the list? Number 7 is the fear of humiliation or failure, like saying no effort is worth it if it's not going to succeed. Number 8 is the fear of effort or exhaustion or overwhelm, or, I'm not going to do that because it just sounds like too much work. That is really insidious. I see that one often. Number 9 is the fear of bucking expectations of teachers and peers and going against type of what they all expected or predicted for us. Now, this can be the external critic, like a critical parent or teacher or coach or clergy, or it can be the internal critic that a lot of folks have talked about. Number 10 is cultural pressures for modesty and avoiding conspicuous consumption. And number 11 is professional or toxic competition and the culture of our professional chosen field as it defines success or failure. What is a successful bricklayer? What is a successful stockbroker? How successful do you need to be considered a success? How do we define that? How do we measure that? So let's look at some techniques for helping to cope with or reduce or eliminate these barriers from a cognitive behavioral or a positive psychology perspective. So number one, going back to number one, self-doubt. So for this, we use a cognitive reframing from doubt to a humble confidence. We re-examine whoever told us that we can't do something, or that we're not good enough, or smart enough, or rich enough, or connected enough, or prettier enough, and give ourselves the benefit of the doubt by changing our thinking from I can't do this to I don't know if I can do this because I haven't done it yet, but I think I can, or I can learn to get help to do this, and this is important to me. I'm going to rally myself and rally help from others and try to do it. So give yourself the benefit of the doubt. If you can't get to 100% confidence, if you've got too much self to do that, then at least say, well, I don't know, but I'm just going to see. I'm going to try. I'm going to take the next step and the next step after that. And let's just see how far we get with this. Let's just kind of play with it. Number two is about feeling or being deserving. So feeling like we are not deserving of something assumes that there is some judge and jury and execution standing by and judging by that. But there isn't. No one's there. No one cares. You are as deserving as anyone else of the good stuff in life. It's not a contest. You don't have to earn being deserving of having a good life. It's a birthright that's always been there. New Age author Louise Hay did a great speech that's on YouTube and also a CD at hayhouse.com is her website for her content, books and CDs and stuff, about just called prosperity. And she says that we need to embrace the belief that life is here for us. In cognitive therapy, we talk about the classic cognitive distortions of thought and the thought fallacies that many people fall into. They've researched the most common ones, such as in the work of CBT pioneer Aaron Beck, MD. One of these challenges is called the fallacy of heaven's reward, which is a historically puritanical belief that we toil and suffer in this world only to receive our reward in heaven in the afterlife if we have sufficiently behaved ourselves. But instead, we can believe that heaven is on earth. It is the gift of life that we have. It's right here, like a lump of clay to model or a blank canvas to paint with our own tools. It's understanding that being deserving is not exploitive of others or asserting that you deserve more than others in a way that gets close to being narcissistic, but it's the self-compassion of allowing others and ourselves to have. It's not a zero-sum game where someone has to lose in order for another to win. Us or them, kill or be killed, winner, loser. Conservative religious people who are viciously anti-gay and who want to restrict legal rights or punish us for who we are, they can get into this, even as they have all their own rights already. It's like saying, it's not enough that I have enough to eat. I must also watch you starve because I'm better than you and you deserve punishment for that. Now that's sadistic. That's getting pleasure out of other people's pain. So compassion starts with ourselves, and we fight only when we need to defend ourselves or stop others from hurting us or those we care about. There is a place for fighting. There's a place for all of that. There's a place for aggressive fighting. There's a place for war. Look at World War II. If we didn't fight an actual war, then the atrocities of the Axis powers in World War II would have taken over our world and made it a miserable place. That had to be fought. So there's a place for that. It's rare that we have to use violence. It's rare things come to that, but sometimes it does in the annals of history. So defending ourselves to stop others from hurting us or those we care about. That's the Wonder Woman approach. She deflects bullets from the bad guys with the special bracelets. She doesn't shoot the guns. She deflects the problem. Neither does Batman. Batman doesn't shoot or kill people. They might knock them out of your hands and they might pick you up and toss you across the room, but they don't instigate the problem. We are deserving because life is here for us, but it's for others too. We can all do this. Louise Hay said, it's like we all stand on the shore by the sea and collect our share of water. If we have a cup or a bucket or a thimble of water to collect, there's enough there for everyone, and there's no way we're going to run that ocean dry. Number 3 is betraying our parents. So this isn't true for all families because some parents want their children to succeed and they'll make sacrifices for them too. But in the case of narcissistic parents who compete with their own children and don't want them to succeed beyond what they have achieved, this feeling can get instilled in their children. We might feel guilty because we earn more than mom or dad ever did, or we live in a better house, or we travel more for leisure, or we achieve some kind of notoriety. We have to allow for there to be changes in the generations, or break away and make our own way. Our parents didn't do everything their parents wanted them to do either, or their parents above them. The apple falls from the tree in every generation. In television's new modern classic Downton Abbey touched on this very cleverly by the writer Julian Fellows. His character of the very wise and wisecracking Dowager Violet by the legendary British actress Maggie Smith saw in one episode a woman character in a then modern 1920s dress, and her parents were horrified at the style and knew that Violet, her great aunt, would be mortified. But she wasn't. When she saw the girl wearing the outrageous new fashion of dress, she recalled her own rebellious youth and the fashion at that time. And she says, well, I wore the crinoline and the mutton sleeve. I am in no position to criticize. So history and economics change in the country and in the generations, especially with the rapid acceleration of technology. We can succeed more than anyone else in our family and still honor them. If they came from hardship, we are under no obligation to repeat that tradition. There can be generational class mobility. And in fact, we should not try to repeat that hardship. We should try to overcome that generation by generation. That's how we grow as a family legacy. Number 4 is a fear of being seen. If we are naturally introverted or even have a full social anxiety or social phobia, which is the fear of negative evaluation by others in social situations, gee, as gay men, we never heard of that, right? We might avoid our own potential because we are ambivalent about how seen we want to be, from being a social media influencer to staying behind the scenes as a silent partner like an investor or an author. But we can achieve a lot and still take actions to protect our privacy and safety and comfort. Even Hollywood stars can be world famous and still maintain privacy if they're generally shy. I had a brief internship in the 80s at the classic sitcom, the gay iconic, The Golden Girls. And B. Arthur, who played Dorothy, was known to be this tough, no-nonsense character. And before that, as the title character about the outrageous tough cookie Maude, another sitcom, was actually very shy about the public. Not so much in character, but as herself for personal appearances, that really unnerved her. Classic Hollywood actress Greta Garbo was known for being a recluse. And many well-known faces are actually people who want to achieve with their face on TV or movie screens everywhere, but they avoid being seen personally. And if they can do it at that level of being world famous, well, then we can too. We can trust that we can achieve without sacrificing our privacy forever. So sometimes we fear not being seen, not being recognized, but sometimes we can fail to achieve because we are afraid of being seen. We're afraid of being in the spotlight or exposed. And we have to overcome that as well. Another one, it's a little more subtle, but number 5, fear of being the rich douche. Some people hold themselves back from achieving lots of things because they don't want to be seen as arrogant. They see too many examples of the bombastic, overly confident, bellicose douchebag who runs roughshod over the rights and dignity of other people. Donald Trump. On some level, we can believe that if we never achieve much, we never have to be accused of such off-putting behavior. But we need to understand that character and achievement are different variables. There are bad, successful, rich people, and there are good, successful, rich people. It's not the economics or the socioeconomic status of the person, it's the character of the person. Elon Musk is an exploitive, obnoxious oligarch who repels people with his arrogant personality and his harsh policies, but he's wealthy. Dolly Parton is a supremely talented, good-natured, generous philanthropist who's also a multimillionaire. Both are rich people, but of different character entirely. And we can allow ourselves to succeed in all kinds of ways without sacrificing our values in the process. Go ahead and go for it. It's very likely not going to go to your head, and then if it does, then hopefully you have a good friend you trust who will take you down a notch and says, girl, get it together. Stop having all this go to your head. Remember where you came from. Number 6 is fear of ending our bucket list. Some people are afraid to achieve because they always want to be motivated by something to strive for. They're afraid to achieve because they fear they will run out of things to work, wish, and hope for. And then where would they be? But as the musical Sunset Boulevard says, there will always be new ways to dream and new mountains to climb. If we achieve a lot and we check off all the items on our bucket list, if we're that lucky, well, then don't just kick the bucket, add new items to the bucket list. We will all probably leave this life with some items still unchecked on our bucket list, but completing it is not the object of the game as much as working on it and enjoying that process. Number 7 is fear of humiliation or failure. And sometimes holding ourselves back means that we don't even attempt something, small or large, especially large, because we have this fear that we will be or feel humiliated if we somehow fail at it. But how do we define failure? Cognitively, we must reframe this to accept that failure is just a learning tool for refining our approach. We always succeed in learning something from the experience. There's a saying that there is no no. There are just different pathways to getting to yes. Others can't humiliate us because we control our actions. We know our worth, and we don't owe critics or naysayers anything, whether it's to succeed or fail. We are not beholden to others' judgments, as they don't have legal standing for actual or implied authority for that. If something is worth doing, it's worth doing badly, as one mentor has said to me. Completion, not perfection, is another adage. We must reframe failure from the catastrophic to the annoyingly inconvenient but useful for redesigning our approach. Some of the most successful people in history have had this. They've kept at it and kept at it, and they might not have achieved the success that they originally envisioned for themselves, but they get something adjacent to it that's as good or better. Jack Canfield, the author behind the Chicken Soup for the Soul book series, wrote another book called The Success Principles, which I really love because it really explores this idea of what is success for each of us. The tagline is how to get from where you are to where you want to be. Number 8 is the fear of exhaustion. I know that there are some who don't bother pressing on for all they are potentially capable of due to a fear that hustling hard is just too much damn work and it's exhausting. And unfortunately, this is somewhat true. Reaching our full potential, however we define that, has to be balanced with a realistic expectation of ourselves and others, and factoring in the humane necessity of self-care. Some people are satisfied with less, sometimes a lot less if it means avoiding work. Early in my career, I worked at a nonprofit organization program for homeless people where I met some people, it was rare, but sometimes, who would rather live in a cardboard box in an alley and drink alcohol all day than pursue any kind of recovery or mental health or work to join the mainstream. Sometimes when I see guys who aren't particularly accomplished in the traditional way, they're not hustling, they're not starving, they're not knocking themselves out in the rat race. I get a little envious. Some people love that. But as the song lyrics from Stephen Sondheim from Gypsy go, that's okay for some people, some humdrum people to be, but some people ain't me. Instead, we need to trust that we will be okay even if we are taking on a lot of challenge and work. We will devise a self-care plan at every phase of our efforts, such as grad school, and it is possible to reach our full potential, or at least a great percentage of it, while still living a good life and practicing boundaries and self-care. The guys I've worked with who've become doctors, or certainly therapists, or lawyers, or things that take a long time and a lot of schooling or a lot of training to do, or a lot of work over time, like writing a book or something like that. You take it just one step at a time, and you don't look at the whole thing. You don't look at the whole mountain to climb necessarily when you're first starting. You just kind of say, okay, but what is the next step? What is the next step that I need to do right now? Oh, I need to write a paper for this course, or oh, I need to study for this exam, or oh, I need to do some kind of a project as part of a program, and then that leads to a degree or a license, or even things like opening a business. I have a whole webinar available on the Thinkific, it's a tough word to say, thinkific.com platform about gay men starting your own business. And in that seminar, I talk about how gay men opening their own business starts with the psychological, and then quickly it moves into the practical. What are the practical step-by-step things that you need to do to become a full-time self-employed person with your own business? Because that's how you oftentimes earn more money, is being your own boss. And it can be very rewarding because you're creating something that is part of the professional sphere, but it also comes from your own individual dreams and goals and ambitions. So if you're interested, check out the Thinkific platform and that seminar, Gay Men Building Your Own Business. So number 9 is fear of bucking expectations. If we do a deeper consideration of your unconscious mind, which is something that we therapists do if we're using the psychodynamic school of thought for psychotherapy, we are exploring the deeper motivations and dynamics that might be driving us toward or away from a certain behavior. We can sometimes keep ourselves back from our full potential because on an unconscious level, we may feel disloyal to our former selves. And we may feel like we want to keep the peace and hold everything as it's always been, out of the sense of comfort that we get from staying in our comfort zone and where all things are familiar. But we make changes when we realize that maybe the real us was there all along, and the not successful person was the one who was inauthentic. We played it safe, or we laid low because we were afraid of doing or becoming something that others didn't see or didn't want to see in us. Sexual self-empowerment can be this way, when we've always been kinky all along, left to our own interests, but we shied away from that to meet family or church or societal expectations or obligations that we felt to play the role that we were put in. But if we cognitively challenge this, we realize that we owe those who underestimated us nothing. We don't have to fulfill the expectations of people who underestimate us. Maybe we owe them nothing but a smug satisfaction and a retroactive satisfaction that comes with proving them wrong. Sometimes living well is the best revenge when it comes to showing that people in our past who bullied or ignored or devalued or insulted or invalidated or mocked or dismissed us were both mean and just factually incorrect in treating us that way. It's like that scene in, I make a lot of pop culture references, but Julia Roberts in Pretty Woman, when the shop girls in Beverly Hills, give her a lot of attitude because they thought that she was poor, that she was the call girl or whatever. And then she goes back in and buys the whole place I think at a competing store. There's a certain smug satisfaction in living to achieve and show up the people who underestimated us because they're really getting their comeuppance. We live to achieve to prove them wrong. Maybe that's not our primary motivation for doing things, but it is an added bonus to correct the injustice of them trying to impose their oppression on us. There gets to be a bit of what I call the healthy haughtiness in our rebuttal to their erroneous assessment, proving them wrong. Number 10 is the pressure of a cultural modesty. Worldwide, different cultures define success differently, such as America's conspicuous consumption and trappings of the nouveau riche versus some of the more progressive countries like Spain, where there is some cultural pressure to be modest and not flaunt wealth, which is considered by many to be in poor taste. Anyone who doesn't have societal privilege of race, class, sexual orientation, appearance, connections, and certainly gender, has been cultivated to lay off and serve others with the superior traits. We can be nice, gracious, non-exploitive people and still be successful, especially as we define it for ourselves. All cultures have a loophole for success, even if the styles of expression might differ. And Louise Hay would call that prosperity or abundance thinking, to assert that we can do all kinds of interesting and fun and nice things without ever getting into exploiting others. Lots of people have done this, and they have disproved the idea that you have to be exploitive of others to get ahead. That is a very old school, limiting, patriarchal, selfish, sadistic way of looking at success. And there's a lot of popularity of that. The Wolf of Wall Street and greed is good and Trump and all that stuff, that you have to exploit others to get ahead. And it's just an erroneous way of living. All it takes is one decent person to really be successful to disprove the idea that the only way that you can get ahead is to step on others. But we also have to defy this idea that modesty is somehow better than success. That somehow if we're a failure, well, then we deserve pity, or that sympathy, or we're coloring within the lines. We can have all kinds of success and still not be a douchebag. It's a matter of character and presentation. Number 11 is about toxic competition and how our field defines success. So several of my clients have discussed workplace topics such as toxic competition, especially when I do executive coaching, such as being undermined by a colleague or by a competitor, or having someone else take credit for our work. I've experienced some of that. Or competitors plagiarizing intellectual property and claiming it for their own. You see influencers do this. They'll take something that someone else does and then make their own about it, and it's the same material. The fitness influencers do this a lot. And someone might come out with material very similar to this in a few weeks. It's been done many times before, but it's not our job to let them go ahead in their unethical means. It's a game, and that game is open to everyone to just be at their best. Some professions validate underhanded tactics, such as sales. Very competitive sales environments have a tendency to socially and culturally validate and reinforce underhanded tactics. And others, such as my field, social work, look down on success as betraying the less fortunate, and that to help other people means to starve or be a martyr. I see that in social work with peers a lot, where if you're in private practice and not starving in a nonprofit, that you're somehow doing something bad. That's not true. So other fields don't define success as anything but the quite excessive. The definition of success is very subjective, and it can change with the times or with cultural influences or historical influences or generational influences quite a bit. But it's how we define success that will be really important to us now, and certainly in later life when we reflect on how we've spent our lifetime. Let's talk about cultivating support. So there are probably many more considerations on something as broad as reaching your full potential. I know that that's a very broad, almost generic topic. And this might be personal or professional or financial or athletic or social or civic impact. But these are a discussion of some of the ways that will help you get started on reflecting on which of these troublesome dynamics that you identify with and which ones are holding you back. So to embrace the concept of lifelong learning and continuous growth, we often need to identify and let go of our limiting beliefs. Maybe we've had those for a long time, but we need to embrace a growth mindset, which is open to all of us, not just some. For gay men, we achieve that by overcoming the trauma that Alan Downs discusses in his classic book, The Velvet Rage. We need to reclaim our personal power if it or parts of it have been lost to the societal pressures and the minority stress that gay men face worldwide. And of course, there can be an intersectionality of minority stress, because maybe there's being gay, but there's also being a person of color, or coming from a different background, or fighting the bureaucracy of immigration policy, or overcoming some type of physical or psychiatric disability. So we sometimes have to reclaim our personal power within the context of either our privilege or the lack thereof, and the intersectionality of the diverse traits that we are. So we need continuous support from our own internal resources that we summon within ourselves. Some of these internal resources are like confidence, or a sense of drive, or a sense of determination, or resilience to get through setbacks and challenges. And we need to skillfully recruit support from an army of others, both personal supports and professional ones, like a therapist or coach, but also good doctors, or good lawyers, or good teachers, or professors, or good mentors. So expanding our full potential is a lifelong process. It's not a single event. Successes can happen simultaneously, all at once, but it's more a series of meeting sequential goals. And this can take a long time, but as I say, getting there is half the fun. So we cultivate and we nurture our interpersonal support systems for as long as we have new challenges to overcome or new and rewarding goals that we've set out to achieve. So, if you'd like to cultivate support for the goals that you have to unfurl your potential, consider therapy if you're in California, or coaching in the United States or around the world. And I can explain more about the differences in those types of services. There's some conceptual differences, and there's some legal and ethical differences that we would need to review in all fairness. So, check out other episodes of the podcast when you have a chance. We're up to well over 170 episodes now. You can also think about ways that you can define your own benchmarks of success anytime for this week or month or year or decade. Either decade on the calendar or decade of where you are in your 20s, in your 30s, in your 40s, 50s, and so on. Because really at every decade, there's a very common challenge that we have. Erik Erikson talks about this. Every age of life brings a very predictable kind of challenge in life, and every age of life brings a certain reward. And so the trick is, at every age of life, it's to make the most of what that decade tends to be about, or what you want it to be about, while at the same time that you're mitigating the challenges of that. So if you're interested, call or email or text for details, and let's move the needle forward for you on what your goals are. The email is ken@gaytherapyla.com for therapy, or ken@gaycoachingla.com for coaching services. But calling or texting especially, at 310-339-5778. That's 310-339-5778 is often the fastest and the easiest way to reach me. And let's see what we could do together. That sounds like the line in Wicked, doesn't it? Think of what we could do together. So thanks, and I'll see you next time.